Hey everyone, pardon me, I want to welcome you to today's session of Revelation here this morning. I'm sorry, I'm a little out of sorts. I've been dealing with a few things here this morning, I guess, and so therefore I'm running a little bit behind. We're going to take a look at finishing up chapter 17 and then delving into chapter 18 to, I'm going to say right around verse 10 here. But before we begin, I'm going to ask you to join me in a word of prayer here this morning. Heavenly Father, Lord, I ask, Lord, that you would guide this session, this study. I ask, Father, Lord, that your name would be magnified and glorified through it all. Lord, I just ask, Father, that you would let it be easy to speak and easy to listen to. Lord, I ask that we would all gain a greater understanding of your word, especially of the eschatology of these end-time events. Lord, Father, Lord, I just ask, Lord, that you would just let your truth be revealed to us here today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I'm having a little trouble with the phone setup here, so I'm going to have to remember that, or maybe I just go out and buy another tripod, so I have one at church and one here. But we're going to start out today in Revelation chapter 17, verse 16 and 17, which will conclude chapter 17 as well. So let's look at verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. Remember, the other names in translations are harlot, prostitute, okay? And shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn up her fire. Okay, so what we got here is these 10 horns that were upon this beast that this harlot was, remember, riding upon, and John had been taken in the spirit out to the wilderness, and I think that it was a wilderness of the sinful world. These 10 horns here, the first 3.5 years of the tribulation are going to be dominated by and really run by the apostate church, the Babylon, the religious system, or the religious arm of this pending and upcoming one world government and system. Now, again, we're not 100% sure what this term of kings being used here is going to mean. Is it going to mean 10 literal kings? Is it going to mean that there's going to be 10, the world's going to be divvied up into 10 divisions, provinces, with like a governor over them, who these kings would be, all right? We're just not 100% sure on it, but we do know for sure what the outcome is going to be, is that there, at some point, again, I've established that it will be at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation, that these kings are going to turn on the harlot, the religious arm of the one world system, the apostate church, or the apostate Babylon, religious Babylon here. And they're going to do this just as the Antichrist is beginning to rises to power, I should say, like that. You know what? I'm going to flick this light on here in the kitchen. I'm getting a lot of glare from my window. I don't know if you noticed that or not. So I'm just going to be a little cattywampus here for the rest of the study. So they're going to utterly destroy, with all the capabilities they have, this apostate religious monster that has been created here. So let's look at 17. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. See, that's how we know that this is going to occur about at the midpoint of the 7-year tribulation, because that's when they're going to turn on this apostate church, okay? And they're going to give their power and their authority to the kingdom of the beast. Now we know that he comes to true power as he enters into the newly built Jewish temple in Jerusalem, and thereupon he will make a worldwide proclamation that he is God, and that everyone will bow their knee and they will worship him as such. So I'm going to read this again. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So what's going on here? God's using them to help to fulfill what his will is, and against this evil, unrepentant world. And so they're going to, in a sense, jump from the frying pan into the fire. They didn't like the power that this apostate church held over them. So they're exchanging one evil for something that's even more catastrophically evil, and that's going to be the Antichrist, because they're going to be answering directly now to him. And again, it's midpoint through the tribulation hour. And again, God's using these individuals as pawns in his chess game and on his chessboard. And we're going to see here in the not too distant future that God is going to say checkmate. All right, but we're not there yet. So now we're going to start into chapter 18. Remember, I said we were going to just finish up a little bit of 17 here. Now, I'm going to break this into sections. The first section is going to be 1 through 3. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Wow. Quite a scene once again that John is going to witness, or writing that he witnessed. So after the fall of the apostate church, the Babylonian aspect of the religious aspect of the Great Babylon, once it falls, okay, all of a sudden we're going to enter into something. It's a new phase, okay. This is an indictment that God is bringing down and declaring about another part of the great Babylonian end-time system, which, of course, again, we know was run by the revived and revised, is the word I should be using, Roman Empire. So he said he saw another angel come down from heaven, and this angel was mighty, strong, with authority, and the whole earth was lighted with his glory. Now that is that going to be, is that symbolism? Maybe here, but I think the point is that this angel is going to shed the light and the light of God, and it's going to be an attention getter here. And what does he say? He says, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. We have to be careful here, all right? Because there are some that believe that the Babylon of chapter 17 and this Babylon of chapter 18 are the same exact thing. I differ with that. I think that they're intertwined, but I believe what is being referred to here is going to be the economic and the commercial aspect of the Antichrist world system. So John's seeing ahead here, isn't he? The angel, I should say, is declaring that, this is coming all to an end. And we're beginning into those stages here. Now, this chapter also begins to unfold with the continuation and the completion, remember, of the seventh vial judgment. Remember, we didn't conclude it in our prior study. It only went so far. And then here we're going to see it come to absolute completion with the destruction of this economic Babylon. Again, it's not the same as in the one in chapter 17. But I do believe that they are entwined and they are both part of this great end time world system. Now remember, the first in 17 is the apostate religious Babylon that basically held power over the earth's regions, or the earth, for 3.5 years. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Of the tribulation. Again, I'm reiterating these things. Babylon of chapter 18 is the commercial and economic part of this demonic, cataclysmic world system. Now, to use an old term, the apostate church met its Waterloo when the beast rises to power midway through the 7-year tribulation period. The apostate church is destroyed, and I think that the destruction really truly comes because the Antichrist, again proclaiming himself as God, wanted to be supreme over the religious aspects of this world system. So the natural thing to do is get rid of your possible enemy, right? If that's feasible. I think that's what happened here. So the apostate church, all right, it's been knocked down to its knees, all right, when the Antichrist comes to power. Now, in 18 here, the economic wing of the one world government system now is in the direct firing line of the wrath of God, coming down and completing this seventh vial judgment. Now I'm going to read 4 through 8. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her." Now, my people that is brought out in verse 4, that is Israel. That is God's historically that's been God's people, and nothing has changed here. So this is kind of a warning. But the interesting point is, it's not the angel that's saying this. Remember the angel from verse 1 and 3 making the declaration that the economic Babylon has fallen? Well, here this is a voice coming directly from heaven. And I think this voice is Jesus. All right, because of the fact that he says, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sin." So I believe that this is going to be the voice of Jesus that's telling his people, or giving him a stark warning. Don't bend a knee to this system. Okay? Come out of her. Well, what I think is this is a reiteration of prior chapters no, that's not where I want to go with that. Here's where I want to go with this. Remember one of the warnings that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24? He gave a stark warning to his people Israel that at some point he says to them, flee to the mountains. Remember, we did those studies in prior sessions. This could be the remnant of those that had not done so already. Okay, and I'm going to tell you something. If they hadn't done so already, they have to be out of their minds. Okay, because the persecution that's being brought against them is overwhelming. So I think it's possible that there was still a remnant that did not flee, as in prior sessions, to go to the mountain, which we've already established is that ancient city of Petra here. So he says, you need to get out from underneath the blanket of this world system. And don't partake of her sin, because you don't want to be caught in the ire, the shooting line of the wrath that's going to finish up this system. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. So the sins of Babylon, apostate, yeah. Economic, yeah. Remember, the governmental part of the Babylon, this end time Babylon, it's still standing at this point. Okay, because as long as the Antichrist was going to walk upon this earth and declare himself God, until we deal with that in chapter 19, the governmental system of this monstrosity that it's going to be is still working. But I'm telling you what, folk, God is coming hard against it. And you're already through these things. It's showing us that there's already cracks in the wall of this system. It was so bad that heaven couldn't ignore it. That their sins and their wrongdoing against God's people Israel and against God's the tribulational saints wasn't missed by heaven. In fact, it echoed through the halls of heaven. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, and the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. I think that this is more of a statement about God's wrath than it is against his people Israel, because honestly, what power are the remnant of Israel really going to have to be able to bloody up the Antichrist? So if there are opportunities though for God's people to somehow battle this now I'm not saying physically, okay, but spiritually, they're not to worry about the severity of the judgment that's coming upon that sinful Babylon. In fact, they need to prepare themselves for that judgment and justice from God to double here as this closing of this seventh vial occurs. In 7, John, or this voice, again, I think it's Jesus, he's giving some reasons as to why this is going to fall, and it is a process of falling. He said, how much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. You know what? Here is a great example of pride cometh before the fall. All right. This Babylonian system doesn't believe that anything or anyone can touch it. That it stands against God's judgment, and that it's not going to submit or succumb to this. But Christ here again, I think it's his voice. It says, well, you better think again, because all the things that was brought against my people in this earth and the tribulational saints, you're going to regret it, every bit of it. 8, therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall utterly be burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. So what are the plagues that are going to fall upon her? Well, death, mourning, famine, and fire. Okay, it's going to be utterly consumed by these things, as God doesn't just drive the Antichrist and this future governmental system to its knees. God is going to utterly and absolutely crush it, and it will be no more. So, we know that those are the things that are going to occur. And the other thing I pick up in this, at least to my discernment, is that when this happens, and again, we've studied this in a prior session or two, can't remember where exactly off the top of my head, but when this happens, it's going to be sudden. It's not going to be something that's a build-up, or it's not going to be something that's going to take a certain amount of time. It sounds like when it comes, it's going to be like a hammer coming down on an anvil here, and it's going to be complete. All right, yeah. And so this system's going to be knocked down to the mat, and there's not going to be a 10 count, because it's going to be a permanent TKO there, if you understand what I mean by that. Now 9 says, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning. Excuse me. 10, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Did I not just say that it was going to be sudden and that it was going to be complete? Whenever this occurs, it's going to take them all by surprise, because they're not going to be expecting it. And God's going to be that sudden and that complete in the justice that he's bringing against this Babylon. But you can see that in 9 that the world, again, I don't know how it's going to be broken up as far as, again, is it going to be in these 10 kings that we've been talked about? Are there going to be 10 provinces? Are there going to be 10 economic regions? We don't know. I don't know that for sure, so I can't tell you conclusively. But what I do know is that these kings and all of the earth they've thrown in. They went all in with the Antichrist, and they were, even through all the judgments and the plagues and everything else, they were still standing for the moment here. And it's what this is saying also is that the world, okay, got fat off of being aligned with the Antichrist, at least the upper class. Okay, we've talked about that before as well. that the upper class, the rich of this world, will remain that way. I can't say all of them; that'd be ridiculous to be able to say that. But in general form, there, remember, don't withhold the wine, and the I can't think of the other term there. But what it indicated is that there's still going to be plenty to go around for those that can financially afford to pay for it here. But another point that I want to bring out here with this chapter 9 or verse 9 is the fact, again, remember earlier on, whenever I said that there are some that believe that Babylon of 17 and 18 are the same, excuse me, and I made the point that no, they're not the same, but they're going to be intertwined as part of this end time world system here. Now, something I want you to pick up on, and I think it drives home the point even better, that these are two separate and distinct monstrosities here. In 17, back to 17 again. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn with her fire. Okay, what do they think? They reach a point of this apostate church and its influence and its power over them. Well, it says that they have a great hatred for this, for this religious Babylon, and they do everything they can to bring her down, and they are successful. So they are willfully and willingly cheering for the destruction and demise of the religious part of Babylon, end-time Babylon. But what happens here when the economic system collapses? What we just said, all right? They shall bewail her and lament for her when they see the smoke of her burning. And they're standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for 1 hour is thy judgment come. What's that showing us? That they're mourning, they're grieving over this loss. What did they do in chapter 17 to the apostate church? They were willing participants to bring it down. Here they are crying and wailing and mourning and grieving for this part of the end time system, this Babylonian, the economic and commercial aspect. This is where they made their money. This is how they, this is how they lived. This is how they kept their power. So can you see that that again, these were two different things. They willfully wanted the destruction of the apostate church, but they are in absolute turmoil of the loss of the economic aspect of the this end time system here. So let's go a few more verses. 11, and again, if you're joining us late, we're in Revelation 18, and we worked up to verse 11. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more. Okay, remember, this is how they were going to stay alive and survive during all the judgments and all the carnage and destruction that the world's going to hold because of this economic part of Babylon, end-time Babylon. Believe it or not, trade in the commercial aspect of things was going to survive and was going to continue here. How that exactly is going to happen, don't know. Not going to be here to see it. Okay, so but we know that the merchants of the world are absolutely terribly upset that the economic Babylon is fallen. And why? Because people weren't going to be able to buy their merchandise any longer. 12. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all Thean wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and brass and iron and marble and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. Well, that covers a whole ton of trade, doesn't it? International trade for what's left of this world after all these plagues and judgments. But as you see in 12 and 13, there's nothing that I can see, I mean, realistically, from all of those mentioned things, that anything is going to, how do I want to say this? They're all going to be vastly affected by the fall of this economic Babylon, as we can only imagine. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. Remember, I've said this a couple times. We went into it in depth in a prior session. The fact that the rich are going to get richer. The rich are going to still have the things that they want. I don't say need. I'm going to say that they want to continue purchasing and being a part of their lives, while the rest of the surviving population isn't even going to be able to barely buy a loaf of bread. So when we see, and the fruits that thy soul lusted after departed from thee, yeah, see what I'm saying? They were filling their proverbial selves with all the good things of this earth, while so many others suffered. And through all the death and the calamities, they wanted to make sure that they themselves were taken great care of. 15. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. Well, the last 2 Sundays I preached a message, and the message was called Guilty by Association. And if any of you were there or caught it live feed, it's a fact that there may someday come for us, and we know that it happened to the early first century church, to the apostles, to those early disciples, down through the ages, where there may come a time that we have to plead guilty to us being found guilty of association with Jesus Christ. Here, these merchants, when things were good, they wanted to find association with this economic Babylon. But here, you see, they stand afar off. They're keeping their distance, if you will, because of fear. Just read it. The fear of her torment, weeping, and wailing. Her torment, weeping, and wailing, but through that, what did it cause the merchants to do? Same thing. And the merchants will say in 16, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. And remember, it is not my discernment that any of this is speaking about the real city of antiquity of Babylon, which was, again, we know, was located in modern-day Iraq. It's not referring to that, okay? It's referring to the parts of the system that is called Babylon. So when it says, alas, this great city, it's talking about the system, all right, the economic system that comprised this latter-day Babylon. 17. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught, and every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off. Again, I do not believe that this excuse me, is talking about a physical city of old. Right? What is referring again in 17 is the lamenting how fast and how complete this destruction was of this economic Babylon. And when the terms that he's using, John is using of shipmaster and all the sailors that trade by sea stood afar off, to me, what that is, again, what is indicating, again, is that, yes, they were lamenting the loss of their business, of their loss of finances, the loss of their source of all these things. But they stood afar off because there was really not one single thing they could do to help anybody. They couldn't help the system any longer because God was bringing it down. And there wasn't a thing that they could do. And they cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and they cried, weeping and wailing, saying, alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships. Now it's talking about international trade here again. In the sea by the reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. You see, they keep going back to this thing. They're absolutely in shock that the golden calf, if you will, had been melted down and destroyed here. Their source of gaining riches was gone. And it was an ancient custom that they would throw dust on their heads, and that was a sign of they were in lament, that they were in grief, and they were in mourning. But I'm going to stop at verse 20. Let's see what heaven's reaction is to this destruction. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. Remember we talked about in a prior session that that John heard voices that were coming from under the holy temple altar in heaven, and these voices were saying, Lord, how long before justice is served? How long before we are avenged, our death and martyrdom? And you remember what the response was? Just be patient. It's coming. It'll be just a little while. Well, here you start to see the fulfillment of those words to the martyred tribulational saints. So we're going to close up shop with this today. Next session, we will, let me take a look at this. We're going to be if you want to read ahead, Revelation 18, 21 through 24, which will end the chapter. And then we're going to jump into chapter 19, which, to tell you the truth, frankly, is one of my favorite chapters in Revelation, because we're going to see and watch heaven preparing for the second part of the second coming, when Christ will come to this earth as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, destroy the Antichrist, the false prophet. Satan will be put into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. And the economic system, the apostate church, the arm of it in this latter days, Babylon, will be absolutely and totally crushed. That's what's going to happen. So get ready, because chapter 19 has a lot of exciting things that are going to be happening. Hey, listen, I want to thank you for watching today. For those of you that attend live at church, I'm sorry I put information out that I wasn't going to be in there this morning, but later today. But for all of you that watch this, thank you. I hope you maybe learned something. As with any part of prophecy, there may be points of it and parts of it that I may not know what the answer is to. And I feel like I'm honest with you with that I'll say, you know what, I don't know what that is, or we're not privy to this or that. Okay, but I think that hopefully, if you've been following along with this study, I'm hoping that you have been gaining and gathering together a greater understanding of this great book of the revelation of Jesus Christ. Have a great day. God bless you. And if I don't meet you again in this world, I'm going to meet you in the air at the first part of the second coming.